but I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Ooh, that sounds serious, especially when you're Kamala Harris. You see, Kamala Harris is finding herself in a bit of trouble. What kind of trouble? Well, quote, not a healthy environment. This is from Politico, by the way. Kamala Harris' office rife with dissent. 22 current and former staffers spoke to Politico anonymously to raise concern about Kamala Harris and how she treats employees. Here's a quote from someone with direct knowledge of how the Harris office is run. Quote, people are thrown under the bus from the very top. There are short fuses, and it's an abusive environment. It's not a healthy environment, and people often feel mistreated. It's not a place where people feel supported, but a place where people feel treated like beep, because it's a family show. I can't tell you that word, but you can figure it out. Now, let's stop here for just a moment, and I'm going to tell you a couple things that are actually going on. One, first and foremost, this was a hit piece on Kamala Harris that ran in Politico. I'm not sure if there's a more communist publication out there besides maybe Pravda than Politico. What does that mean? Joe Biden did this. Politico doesn't run this piece without Joe Biden, or at least Joe Biden's camp, either flat out giving it to Politico or in the very least signing off on it. What's actually in the article is not that big of a deal. I'll address it in a moment, but what's actually in the article is not the end of the world. What this tells you is there's enough tension between the Harris camp and the Biden camp. They're now leaking things to their press allies. Hey, I heard Joe wasn't doing that well. You might want to run that in the Washington Post. Hey, Politico, I heard Kamala Harris treats her employees terribly. Go ahead and run a little hit piece on her. These people all have allies in the media. That's how politics works. Remember that. Republicans do too. Now, obviously not nearly as many as Democrats, because basically the entire media is Democrat, but they all have allies in the media. Allies who will run things for them if they want. That's one. This tells you there's real tension between Biden and Kamala. Two, let's address the actual specifics of this. All right, 22 current and former staffers. That's a lot. That's a lot. I generally don't listen to disgruntled former employee guy because there's always one turd who gets hired and he sucks and you got to throw him out the back door and he blames everybody except himself on the way out. And of course he'll run and go grab the local news reporter and say, man, I heard this guy's a real jerk. So, okay, dismiss that. 22 is a pattern. That's a lot. So why would Kamala Harris's office be run this way? Allow me to be offensive and just tell you who Kamala Harris is. I'm not going to go into nitty-gritty, dirty details here because it's a family show, but let's do just a brief rewind here. We understand how Kamala Harris got her start in politics, right? The whole dating Willie Brown thing. We understand that, right? I mean, he was married, she was dating, and whatever. Look, I'm not passing judgment. I'm not giving details. I'm about to establish a pattern for you, okay? So Kamala Harris gets her start that way. He gives her a boost because he's a major, major power broker in California politics. So she did her part, and then Willie did his part and gave her a big boost. Well, Willie Brown to this day will say Kamala Harris and her people, they won't acknowledge his existence or take her calls. Okay, so they have a thing, and then she gets the boost she wants, and then she sets him aside and moves on. Works her way up to be DA in California. And as DA of California, Kamala Harris was this absolute sheriff, tossing marijuana users in the clink. I mean, just an absolute crusher. And then moves on to become a senator. where she goes from being this tough on crime DA to being the most far left senator there possibly was, out of the blue, right? It's weird. I mean, she wasn't that far left. She was this tough on crime person. Now she's out of the blue, as far left as it gets. Then from there, she decides she wants to be president. So she runs for president of the United States of America, where she does all you can possibly do to go in on the identity politics thing. She'd never really talked like that before, but all of a sudden it was, I am woman, hear me roar, look how black I am. It was endless with that. And of course, eventually, during the debates, she basically made Joe Biden look like a KKK member for something he said. And that's a big part, from what I understand, that's a big part of the rift you're seeing between the two. But what does that pattern tell you about Kamala Harris? What should it tell you? Well, she's ambitious. And I don't mean ambitious in like a healthy way that you're probably ambitious. You know, hey, I want to get that promotion. I want to succeed. I want to be the best. I want to do that. Ambition is one of those things you want your kids to have to a point. To a point. What Kamala Harris is somebody who is extremely unhappy, not content, always needing the next thing, will do anything and say anything to get ahead. Now, okay, if that's the guy down in accounting, that's one thing. If it's a politician, especially somebody like a vice president who has a massive staff, that's another. What happens is this: when you have somebody in a position of leadership, whether it be vice president, military officer, the boss in your office, maybe, whatever the case may be, if the boss over you is a ruthlessly ambitious human being like Kamala Harris is, will do anything to get ahead and get the next step, that's going to end up being a bad boss.